not sure to what extent a person like Mr. Megwal will deal with technicalities of the finance ministry, or for that matter Mr. Gangwar. They both don't sound to be the finance ministry kinds, if I may be a little subjective. And also none of his direct protégés have been rewarded with a cabinet post.
All right.
You know, whether the Piyush Goyals or the Nirmala Sitharamans, etc., who are clearly his inclusion in the original cabinet.
So all of this...
Net there is a certain standstill, although he of course remains a very important minister of the cabinet.
Sudhanshu Mittal, let me ask you a specific question about Mr. Jaitley. How should we interpret Arun Jaitley losing the INB ministry? First of all, as you know, he got it in November 2014 when defence was taken away. In a sense, it was compensation for the loss of defence. Secondly, as INB minister last year, he was the man who hosted 3 dinners in his home to introduce the Prime Minister to critical journalists. At that point, obviously, he was thought to be central to the ministry. And thirdly, ultimately, as INB minister, I presume he carries the can for the continuing controversies surrounding the Censor Board and the Film and Television Institute. So if INB is now taken away and he gets nothing in its place, what's the message we should read and understand?
Karanji, first thing you have to understand, this was always an additional charge. It was neither the main charge nor the main this thing. Secondly, you are all you're forgetting the kind of economic activities which are going on in this country. A country which saw an economy in complete disarray when this government took over. The economic initiatives are now bearing fruits. There is a lot to be done, and there is a focus on the economy. In fact, the Prime Minister, if you remember, said, it is to give effect to my budget that I am now making these changes in the cabinet. So please understand the kind of focus there is on the finance ministry, and it is for this purpose that there is a complete, undiluted attention to that ministry.
Can I interrupt? Are you suggesting that the Prime Minister felt that... Are you suggesting the Prime Minister felt that Mr. Jaitley wasn't giving enough attention to finance, that he was getting distracted, and therefore they've stripped him of all other charges? Basically, the Prime Minister is saying, I want you to concentrate full-time on finance and don't give yourself excuses not to do so. Your smile is engaging. Your smile is beguiling.
Is the requirement of the finance minister... Can I finish? Can I finish? The requirement of finance ministry has now grown. The changing economic environment, be it the crisis, international meltdown, and the shining example of Indian economy doing so well.
Okay.
So this requires a different impetus. And look, I just heard Mr. Singhvi talking about 2 of his deputies. I don't think he understands their background. Mr. Arjun Megwal has been an IAS officer who's handled not only finance but also field administration as district collector, where he handles financial situations of the state, of the districts. Mr. Santosh Gangwar is a veteran of 7 times Lok Sabha and a minister and hugely, enormously experienced. Again, as I said, he was holding an independent charge which has now gone to a cabinet minister. So he's been brought in on a very significant portfolio. And as I said, the economic impetus of this government is being undermined. And whenever a reshuffle takes place, please understand it's a bouquet which is presented. It is a combination of activities. Taking every activity in isolation and then doing the kind of cheera phadi.
I don't think you are let me stop you there. All I'll say before I go to the last question to Mr. Singhvi before I take a break is that your words said one thing, but that engaging, beguiling smile on your face, and your eyes are smiling as well, seem to suggest the exact opposite. But I won't editorialize. I'll simply point it out and let the audience come to whatever conclusion they want. But my last question before the break to you, Abhishek Singhvi, what do you make of MJ Akbar becoming a minister? In '89, he was a Congress MP and extremely close to Rajiv Gandhi. In 2002, he was vitriolic in his criticism of Mr. Modi in an article he wrote for the Arab News. He actually said, Modi has shamed India and before the world. Today, he's not only a BJP MP, he's a man who praises Mr. Modi to the skies. And my question is this, is MJ Akbar simply lucky, or does he have sterling qualities which ultimately all parties recognize, even if they don't like each other?
I think that's a very well-researched question, Karan. I must compliment you for it. Most people don't know about that 2002 article, and I compliment you for it. I think he has proved that consistency may be the virtue of fools. So to be inconsistent can be a virtue by itself. Also, don't forget that one of the main persons who is supposed to have advised the Congress stand in the Shah Bano case to Rajiv Gandhi, the main architects of that was Mr. Akbar. Well, I don't think anybody grudges him the departure from the Congress, because that divorce is complete years and years ago. But that divorce never led to an engagement with Mr. Modi till much more recently.
Okay.
Remember also, Karan, that there are, I believe, if I'm wrong, statistically Mr. Mittal will correct me, in this entire cabinet, Minister of State Independent Charge and MOS Simpliciter, only 2 minority faces from that community. Now, I'm sure Mr. Modi did require someone, and I think for diplomacy and articulate, Mr. Akbar writes very well. I'm very fond of his writing, though I disagree with a lot of what he writes. So I think from that point of view, he wanted to use him, especially for the Middle Eastern fold.
All right.
Certainly, there is no ideological affinity here. There is no consistency here.
I think in that answer, Abhishek Singhvi, and in particular in the praise that you have for his writing, I detect a certain amount of affection for a former congressman. You're certainly entitled to do that. That's the sort of bipartisan spirit that's very rare. But it's odd that it features at this moment. I see your finger going up, Mr. Mittal. I have to take a break because commercial compulsion...
One comment.
Go ahead. 1 minute. Go ahead, Mr. Mittal.
Just one comment. There is a saying that what I say today is what I believe today, with the proviso that in light of new facts, I may contradict the whole tomorrow. This is the philosophy of the bravest of the brave. I don't think
translate that into Mr. Akbar's position, and that becomes the following. What I say today is what I will contradict tomorrow. What I say tomorrow possibly could be contradicted day after, because Mr. Akbar is famous for the contradictions, not for the consistency. But let's take a break.
That's a biased interpretation of a truth. That's a biased interpretation of a truth.
A biased interpretation, maybe. But let's take a break at that point. And when I come back, I want to come to the critical subject. What does this cabinet reshuffle tell us about the Prime Minister and his authority? And what does it tell us about Mr. Amit Shah and his authority? We'll be back in a moment's time for the second part of tonight's debate and discussion. Welcome back. You're watching To The Point, and we're discussing last night's dramatic expansion of the cabinet and, more importantly, the reshuffling of the portfolio. Siddharth Vadarajan, let's come to what this whole exercise tells us about the Prime Minister. Would you agree that after this reshuffle in particular, his control and authority over the government is stronger than ever before, and there really is no resistance to him in any quarter whatsoever? This is entirely his government, his people, and his word will be their will.
I would actually turn your formulation around and say that the fact that he acted decisively in the case of 2 or 3 ministers, but failed to act decisively against a whole lot of others, junior and senior, who are either non-performers or have embarrassed the government and embarrassed the party, suggests that he may not be as strong or as decisive as he would like to put out, or as many people tend to believe. I think that this is one key takeaway as far as I'm concerned, that what was called for was a reshuffle along the lines, maybe not as extreme as Harold Macmillan's Night of the Long Knives. What we got instead was a Night of the Short Knives. A few heads rolled, but certainly not enough, and not decisively enough for the government to refurnish or to renovate its image and to engage in the kind of major course correction that is required. So I would say somewhere down the line, maybe Mr. Modi is unsure of himself.
Let me put that to in fact, Sudhanshu Mittal. Mr. Mittal, the point you're hearing is that a strong Prime Minister would have dropped people like Niranjan Jyoti, Giriraj Singh, possibly VK Singh, and a whole host of others who repeatedly embarrassed him. But he's failed to do so. These are people, by the way, he spoke critically of in his Times Now interview. He distanced himself from what they said. But when it came to the opportunity to remove them from the cabinet and ensure that they don't spoil the name of his government, he didn't have the capacity to do so. Now, was that just goodness on his part? Or was it weakness? Or was it that, in fact, he's not as strong as we think he is and he can't act in these areas? Which of the three?
Karanji, I don't think it can be the case of anybody that Prime Minister Modi is not strong, or that he is besieged with challenges from within and outside, that he cannot take his own decisions and he has to run here and there. You see, the era of Manmohan Singh running to the Janpath is not an era of this government. So let's not compare the two, and let's not be so far away from truth and reality. As to why he did not and what Mr. Vadra-Rajan thinks should have happened, that is the critical difference of him being the Prime Minister and Mr. Vadra-Rajan not being the Prime Minister. He has to take a holistic view. He has to look at a very wide canvas before he decides things, and not be judgmental as Mr. Vadra-Rajan. That's the reason, Mr. Vadra-Rajan, this nation hasn't chosen you as the Prime Minister of this country.
All right.
As far as the entire exercise and the entire impact of this exercise is concerned, let me tell you and let me assure you, midway, after understanding a lot of things, after seeing a lot of things, a lot of good has happened.
All right.
And in the next few months, you will see how this government gets invigorated into delivering.
Let's stop making predictions about the next few months. We let the next few months tell us what they have to tell us. Let me bring you in, Abhishek Singhvi. As you perceive the situation from the opposition benches, is Amit Shah now the clear number 2, even though he's not in government and he's only party president? That's a belief many in the media have. Do you share that from the opposition benches?
The answer is an unequivocal yes, and it connects with your previous question. The 56-inch chest in cabinet expansion and formulation, in fact, has contracted. A, for the reason just given, that those clearly embarrassing the government were not dropped, but B also because this cabinet reshuffle has much more of a stamp of Amit Shah than even Narendra Modi. Of course, it is not without Mr. Modi's consent. Mr. Modi has gone along with his trusted colleague, but clearly it is something decided by Mr. Amit Shah, first from the party point of view, and secondarily decided by the Prime Minister from the government perspective, and that's a very important key takeaway. And thirdly, Karan, if you just rewind back to 2014, the way in which Mr. Modi took some very innovative and bold steps, clubbed departments, clubbed ministries, had absolute newcomers in a sense, the Piyush Goyals or the Nirmala Sitharamans, made into charge of very large departments, that indicated in relative terms a greater prime ministerial stamp than anything today. Today is much more conventional, much more imbued with the collectivity of Amit Shah and with the party compulsions and exigencies, more than the government exigencies.
Very quickly, Sudhanshu Mittal, I'll give you the last word, because the suggestion from Abhishek Singhvi is that this reshuffle is in fact inspired, created, designed more by Amit Shah than the Prime Minister. That in fact, at the end of the day, Amit Shah is almost, as far as this reshuffle is concerned, the person who's thinking it through.
A virtue is now being made into a curse. I'm amazed. If the party has a say in how the government should be, it is more democratic, it is more representative of the aspirations of the institution which has been voted by people to power.
Okay.
You should be welcoming it. On one hand you say he is dictator, on the other hand you are now accusing him of having taken the party into confidence. I think it is a virtue, it's brilliant that the party has a say in how the government should be run.
All right.
Instead of welcoming this kind of a broad-based consultation process, you are now demonizing it. I think there is a such a crazy bias
Okay.
that even the goodness of politics has now to be criticized and condemned.
All right,
Let's
we leave
rise
you the
above
last
this. Let's
word.
be
A bias
large-hearted to
where
acknowledge what is
democratic
good
functioning
and what
is
not
being
good.
perceived
If
as
there is something good,
weakness.
let's
The Prime
accept
Minister,
it.
in fact, is being democratic in buying to the party. This is not weakness. I leave you with the last word, although obviously the audience will judge for themselves. My thanks to all three of my guests for joining me. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.